Okay guys, I don't usually do this kind of video because it's going to be more like a podcast, but every now and again, I just, I've had enough. The whole point of my channel is to make sure that leopard geckos have a much better life in captivity, and if I can help people out and put facts out there, then I will. Unfortunately, because I'm quite outspoken about certain things, I probably have a few enemies on YouTube. There's like one person is so funny. They dislike every video I upload straight away. And I think it's really funny because in my head I'm thinking, I'm waiting for that thumbs down, because in my head I'm thinking, I've done a good job. I've really annoyed this person once again. And if someone was completely secure in themselves, if they just didn't like a channel, why would they keep going back on a channel just to dislike it? So in my head, I'm just thinking, this person's clearly jealous. Because it wouldn't matter what I'm talking about, they'll just thumbs down. So every time it does that, it just reinforces. I'm thinking, wow, I'm doing a good job because this person's still getting annoyed with me, so whatever. So, of course I have enemies because certain people do certain things with their leopard geckos, and there's a thing called a backfire effect, and basically if you have a very strongly held belief and someone can present facts and information, evidence, back it up and everything, there's a thing where your belief gets reinforced because you don't want to hear that. And that's a really sad thing, because it doesn't matter, it doesn't affect me, it won't affect you, but it will affect your leopard gecko, and that's what I care about. So I've been a little behind on my comments, and last time I replied to them and there was like over 100 pages of comments, and it took me an hour and a half to reply to everyone. I started going through them today, and I realised every time I go through the comments I start getting really angry. And they've been really cool comments, they've been new questions, really awesome, but there will be those same ones that keep cropping up that I've answered in videos. I've even had videos dedicated to them, but people will still ask me. And I have quite a few videos to go through, so fair enough, but there are certain ones that just sit there and you're just, literal facepalm, you're like, what? So anyway, so the first one is sandy deserts. So I've had leopard geckos for nearly 9 years now, and it's bizarre that some people will still come on my channel and go,
I really like your setup, but do you know leopard geckos are from sandy desert?
Now if I had a leopard gecko for 9 years, you'd think I would have known that by now, but they're not from massive sand pits like people expect. And I have gone through this once again over and over again, so I'm not going to bore you with the details, but it is just so boring to hear this over again. I've actually had someone slag me off for using eco-earth, but they defend sand because they know someone who used it and they were fine. This brings me to the second point. The amount of people that go to me like, I'll do a video on sand or lighting or the importance of vitamins and calcium, and I almost always have people going,
well, I've never used supplements and my gecko's totally fine.
A few months later, guess who's on my message on Instagram or Facebook going, I think my leopard gecko's got metabolic bone disease, what do I do? Fabulous, isn't it? It's like, when people say that, I just think, you know what, in a few months' time you're going to contact me because you've got a problem. It always happens. The amount of people say, actually, I've used sand and I've never had a problem. And then they contact me. Like, the people who watch those videos and take that information and go, you know what, I actually have to change. That's awesome. That's sort of just being open-minded and wanting the best for your pet, and I think that's really awesome. But there are, unfortunately, really stubborn people who, no matter how much information you'll give to them, they'll just ignore you or slag you off. There's actually someone I heard, they had a channel, they clearly don't like me, and they told people not to listen to my information because I want your leopard geckos dead, apparently. And they had one cold hide, they had lights, and they used sand, and their gecko died, and all they did was blame the pet shop and said the pet shop clearly gave it a disease. This is the kind of denial I'm dealing with, the people are just crazy. But yeah, so that's one of the things that come up. Another thing is male and females. The amount of times people say to me, can I house a male and female together? And I'm like, no, it's just basic biology, because some people will say to me, well, my gecko's laid an egg and I don't know why, but it turns out their geckos, male and female, have been living together, and I'm like, well, what do you expect? That's sort of what happens. And also don't do that, because if you're going to breed them and you want to be smart with breeding them, you only introduce them for a short amount of time. Like, I think some people put them together for a few days or a few weeks, I'm not quite sure, but not like all year round. Another thing is when people ask me the age of their gecko or the morph. Now, one thing I'm terrible at is saying what morph a gecko is. The only thing I know is if it's got no black on it, it's probably albino, because it doesn't have any melanin to make it go black. So besides that, I'm not someone who's totally into the morphs and stuff, because I don't breed my geckos, and nor do I really care for their colour or pattern. Like, if they're an awesome gecko, they are, but I certainly don't buy a gecko just because it looks fancy. So when it comes to morphs, I'm not the one to ask. And if you really wanted to know what morph your gecko is, it's better to get it from an actual breeder, because they can tell you all that information, and they can also tell you how old your gecko is, and whether it has any risk of inheriting Enigma syndrome, because that's now like a big thing people keep asking me about. Another thing people say to me is when Gizmo and Ziggy were going through their issues with having an egg in them, people go to me, why don't you just breed them? And I'm like, no, because I'm a responsible owner. Firstly, I don't want to risk their lives, like, breeding them, because that's a serious thing. They can actually die, get egg bound and so on. And also, Gizmo and Minnie are too old now probably to start breeding, and I know that I don't have the time or space for babies, and there's enough leopard geckos out there. There's so many that need rehoming, because people buy them and don't realise how long they live, and then they want to go to uni, so then they sell their leopard geckos, and it's just such a shame that I just think, what's the point in putting any more leopard geckos in the world right now? Because, you know, there's a lot of people breeding, so they don't need me breeding my geckos as well. Another thing I get a lot is, where can you find a breeder? I've said this in another video, like, I don't even know the ones in England to suggest to people. So if you're on the internet watching my video, then I assume you have access to Google, and that's probably where you need to go. Another thing is when people say, they actually literally say, list things I need for my leopard gecko, and I'm thinking, no, I'm not going to sit here when I've made videos about this, and just because of you, because you want to sit there and you want an answer straight away, I'm like, no, I'm not gonna reply to that. So there are people who have contacted me and said, okay, so can I just get this straight, and I'm thinking of getting this and this and this, and that's totally fine, I get that, because you want to make sure you're buying the same thing, the right stuff. But when people literally say, list me all the stuff, I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. Another thing is babies not eating. I have mentioned this in quite a recent video. This is really common, and actually not just babies not eating. I get a lot of people saying, my leopard gecko's not eating. This is like number one problem. Now, before getting a leopard gecko, you should know that they're quite notorious for just being stubborn when it comes to food. And anything I know about leopard geckos not eating is on my channel. So if you've watched all that and you're still completely have no clue why it's happening, then honestly, I probably don't know. Sometimes they, like Gizmo, she didn't eat for about 4 months, and I knew it was to do with that damn egg inside of her, but that's 4 months. They're pretty resilient, but if you are worried, take them to a vet. And also, I get questions about taming the geckos, and once again, I've done so many videos on that. It's just like, Oh, another thing, people get confused, because I think when they go to pick up their gecko, they might put their hand in there and then the gecko might bite it and they might get confused. One big tip for you guys is to scoop them up. If you just scoop them up by the side, especially when they're walking around, sometimes it happens so quickly that they can't react, so they can't really bite you or anything, and as long as you're being secure and confident and holding it, it usually goes down really well. So they were my tips and me venting, basically. I don't think this video has helped anyone, let's face it, but just sometimes, like, I like making these videos, just sometimes the people on YouTube can be a bit of a pain, but for the most part, I have some pretty awesome subscribers, so thank you for that. You're honestly probably the only reason I still make these videos, so that's the honest truth right there. So, thank you for listening, if you've actually listened to this whole thing, and goodbye.